I wanted to provide a quick tutorial video on the math project to give you my expectations of this project, just to help clarify and help maybe give you some more answers to questions that you might have about this project and the way it's supposed to look when you submit it to me. Since you're turning into me an electronic copy, it's very important that you have it very well organized for me, because I'm not going to be able to really flip through it easily because it's electronic, so I'm going to be clicking from page to page. It's very crucial for me. I'm a very type A person, as I've explained. I need it to be very well laid out, and I know that might be a struggle, but I'm going to tell you exactly how I want it to be. I would like you to have a cover page for each section. So on one blank page, I want you just to put section 1, and then on the next page, give me what the information is for section 1. Then when you're done with that, give me a blank page and just put section 2, and then turn the page and do your writing for section 2. Then etc. Keep doing that. I want cover pages for each of these, so when I'm clicking through and scrolling down, I can quickly see, oh yeah, this is their section 3, this is their section 4. Got it. I know what I'm looking at. In section 1, this is going to be the section about your background information about the 2 students you've chosen for your math project. Now, the requirements ask for you to pick a student, one who's on an IEP and one without. I am not going to break any confidentiality, but it's up to you how you want to label your 2 students, whether it's just their initials, whether it's student A, student B, whether it's their student's first name. It does not matter to me. Whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm honestly not going to remember your student's first or last name after I get done grading your project. I'll be very honest. I don't keep track of names or schools or any of that information, just because I pay very close attention to confidentiality. So, if you are in a situation where your setting limits you from being able to meet this choice of having one with an IEP, one without, you need to, before you start telling me about your students, give me a brief summary explaining to me what your limits were as to why you had to choose those 2 students in particular for your project. That's all. It will help me when I'm grading to understand why you had to do that. And I'm very lenient, and I very much understand this due to where your field placement was at, or it could possibly be where you're employed. I completely am not going to hold you to having something different because of your setting. I understand. What I do expect, no matter what students you choose, I would like for you to give me more information about the kiddo. I would like you to give me what they're interested in, what their preferences are, what their strengths are, and what their needs are. And specifically in the needs section, that's where you're telling me about what their real struggles are with math. How long have they been struggling? Has this always been a problem? Are they just sometimes just forgetting things and need a lot of remediation? Is it the pacing? I want you to specifically tell me who this kid is. I want a good idea of who this child is before I start going more into your lesson plans and your assessment, etc. That's not the fun stuff. I want to get to know who this kid is so I can actually relate to what you're trying to do for this student. You can tell me information like what their favorite sports are, what's their favorite food, how many siblings do they have, are they an only child? Those are things that I actually want to know in this background information. It doesn't have to be too lengthy, but I do expect enough information to get a good understanding of who the student is who you're working with. In section 2, this is a very crucial part of your project. This is the assessment plan and work samples. Yes, I anticipate you're giving me real work samples from the student. In this section, you are going to be listing for me the assessments that have either been given by you or by another teacher or somebody else at the school, and what the work samples look like to reflect that data. So you are going to be giving me, and I don't care, I'm a very visual person, so charts are very nice for me, but you don't have to use charts if you don't want to. But no matter if you do a chart or just a write-up, I'd like for you to tell me what the assessment was, who it was given to, the date, the person who administered the test, and what the results were. Now, if you're putting it in a table like this, I expect you to give me a reflection below your table to tell me what that results actually mean to you and what that means for the student. For example, I've given here a perfect example of what the criterion test would look like. To somebody who's never given this assessment, they don't know what the different components are of what this assessment looks like. So when I say 20% mastery, 40% instructional level, 40% frustrational level, somebody who's never given it is going to have no idea what those percentages mean. So what I expect for you to do is come down below and tell me exactly what that means. An example could be, well, at the instructional level, the student was really struggling with adding and subtracting with regrouping, multiplication of single factors, geometry concepts. At the frustrational level, the student was really struggling with multiplication, division, measurement concepts, rounding, and estimation. That gives me a good idea, especially if you go and you pick for your 5 lessons working on estimation. I know where that's coming from and why you picked that to work on for this student. Do I expect you to do everything? Absolutely not. I don't anticipate that you will have the time to do that within 5 lesson plans, but I do want it to tie into what they actually need. And be very clear on which student it's working with. If both students have it, great, but you have to give me that data. I also anticipate that you're going to give me multiple pieces of evidence because one piece is not enough. So if you just give me success maker math, that's not enough. That certainly is not enough. It's not even enough to tell me what that student needs or does not need. I want more than one piece of information. If you only have 2 or 3, that's fine. I just want more than one. Section 3 is all about developing goals and objectives in an individual learning plan. So the goals that the student is working on could come straight from their IEP if they have a math goal. It should be very broad. It might be specific to what they're working on. Your objectives are going to be coming straight from your lesson plan. So your objectives, I anticipate that you're just basically copying and pasting from your lesson plans and putting into this section. That's basically what I'm expecting for objectives. I'm not expecting you to write objectives that you're not really teaching. Those objectives are really what your students are going to get out of your lesson plans. The overall goal is where you want your student to be at. Where do they need to get to after you teach this project? The goal is a lot bigger and broader. They also have to be SMART goals, and I have given you handouts within Blackboard, but if you need more information, I highly recommend that you contact me because this is a do or die when it comes to your lesson plans. If you do not have alignment with your objectives to your assessment and to your standards, you are not going to get a lot of points for your lesson plans, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But for your goals specifically, I'm looking for them to be SMART goals, and SMART goals mean that your goal is specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, and it's timely. If you throw out there that the student is going to master estimation at the end of the 5 units, that's a little far-fetching if the student is so deficit on it. You might need to say that the student is going to have a better understanding, have that conceptual understanding, be able to do basic things towards mastery, but complete mastery, especially if it's a skill that's at a frustrational level for a student, that's hard to do within 5 lessons, no matter how fabulous we are as teachers. So being very realistic about what they can achieve. For example, in 5 lessons, I don't believe a student could memorize all of their multiplication facts if they come into it not even knowing 1 times 1. That's going to be a very big hill to climb. So being very clear about that is important. Is it attainable for this student? And the most important thing is, how is it going to be measured and by when? So if I'm going to use, for example, on this one, by May 2011, that tells me the time, Thomas will add and subtract regrouping with at least 80%. Okay, so I know what I'm measuring by using the Ames Web Math Probes. Okay, that tells me what assessment I'm using for that. That all is specific, it's measurable, it's obtainable, it's realistic, and it's timely. Okay, let's go to the next section. The next section is your section 4, and this is actually your lesson plans. And I've been asked, how many lesson plans do I have to write? You have to write 5. 5 and only 5. Do I anticipate that you write a lesson plan for each student, especially because they're at different grade levels? Absolutely not. I don't anticipate having more than 5 lesson plans. If you feel like you want to have more than 5, that is fine by me, but you are only required to have 5. Now, I do understand if you have a student who is in 8th grade and maybe one who's in 6th grade, it might be very difficult to do lesson plans to meet both of the students' needs, but what I would encourage you to do is, if you have to gear one lesson plan towards one student, please include in that section how you can differentiate that lesson for the other student you're working with. Same thing as if you're working with the other student. How are you going to differentiate it to get the other student involved in that lesson? So you can put that within your differentiated piece within your lesson plans. So one lesson could be more geared for one lesson might be more geared for the other, and that's okay. All I'm anticipating is you're giving me 5 lessons to work on what they need. Within these 5 lessons, you must have the application of co-instruction, technology, peer-mediated instruction, and teacher-constructed/adapted materials. If these are missing, you will not get points. So let's go over this briefly. Co-instruction. So we've talked about co-teaching a great deal. Realizing that this might not be perfect, I still want you to plan in your lesson plan how you could possibly do that in your lesson plan. And I'm not just saying that you list, oh, this is a co-teaching lesson. That's not good enough. What I'm looking for in co-teaching instruction is specifically which strategy of co-teaching teaching you are using, and what the other person is responsible for. Is that person responsible for modeling while you instruct? Is that person responsible for going around and assisting the students? Is that person responsible to be teaching the same exact lesson that you're teaching? I need to know that when you're talking about co-instruction. When it comes to technology, I want you to specifically list for me what the technology is, how to access it, and I also want to know what's the benefit of it. Just sending them down to the computer lab to do some work on math is not sufficient enough. I need to know what they're working on and how that ties into your lesson. Peer-mediated instruction is not group work. Peer-mediated instruction is peers working with each other to teach one another how to do something. So it might be that one is stronger and is remediating for the other, or they're working together to do an investigation to problem solve something. That's fine. They're working together to actually learn something. Just group work, just saying that they're going to be in a group together working on a problem isn't enough for me to say that that's peer-mediated instruction. That just means they're working together. Same thing as, oh, they're going to play a multiplication game together. What's the instructional piece behind that? There's none. Unless one student is helping them with the strategies for 9, for example, with multiplication. How do we remember our 9s? How to remember our 5s, etc. It has to have an instructional piece to it. Teacher constructed and adapted materials. You can, once again, you can't just say, yep, there's teacher constructed materials. You have to tell me how the materials have been either adapted or how you've created them to meet your students' needs. So you need to be very specific on what that looks like and the why. Also, within these 5 lessons, you must have at least one lesson that addresses a conceptual skill, a procedural strategy, declarative math knowledge, and problem solving. Now, as you count, that's only 4 things. So your 5th plan could be whichever one of these that you want. When you label your lesson plan at the very top, I expect for you to say, this is my conceptual skill lesson plan, or this is my declarative math knowledge lesson plan. I want that to be clearly stated up at the top with your name before you start talking about your standards, so I clearly know what you think and how you are writing this plan for. Now, you might have a lesson where you're doing some conceptual skills, you're doing some procedural knowledge, and you're doing declarative. Fantastic. You can have multiple things within one. You just have to label that for me. And at least all of these have to be met within those 5 lesson plans at least one time in one of the lessons. I hope that clarifies that for you. As I stated, if your assessment, your standards, and your objectives do not align, you are not getting a lot of points for your lesson plans. You'll probably get a bare minimum out of your points. And what I mean by bare minimum, I'll probably give you maybe 5 points for your entire lesson plan, which isn't a lot, which will devastate your grade. So please make sure that you have that alignment and it makes sense. Section 5 is review of progress and next steps. And I've been asked, do I have to really teach these 5 lesson plans? No, you absolutely do not have to teach these 5 lesson plans if you're unable to do so. Do I highly recommend you do? Absolutely, because this next section is going to be a whole lot easier to write if you actually teach. If you don't, you're going to have to use your creativity to come up with this. Review of progress is its own section. Review of progress is stating how the students have done since working within these lessons. What have they done? What growth have they made within the specific lessons? The next steps section is what you're going to do now that these 5 lessons are done. What do you still need to do for that student? Is there more remediation needed? Did the students actually master the concepts and they're ready to go on and build upon that concept? Are they needing to do some more tutorials? What is it that they need for their next step to move forward with math? Section 6 is your references. This is the section that you're going to have your MLA or an APA references for your lesson plans. Any idea, if you use Touch Math, if you use Saxon, if you use a website, if you use whatever, you must document for me where you got that information. If you have worksheets that your students are filling out, you must document for me where that came from. And use the correct format. If it's not an MLA or APA format, you are not getting credit for your references. Okay, so be careful. I would highly suggest that you can even Google search Purdue OWL. Oh my goodness, I had a hard time saying that. Purdue OWL. If you reference that, you will be able to get any APA or MLA format. You can also use any references you've obtained from college, of course, but that's a really great website to know how to reference information. Websites, just as an FYI, if you just list the website, that is not the proper way to citate a website. Just FYI, you need to tell me when it was retrieved, who the author was, etc. So there's a lot more to it. Okay, if you have any questions, I encourage you to give me a call or send me an email, and I'd be more than happy to give you some more information on your project if this does not clarify it enough. I hope this helps. Thanks.